He saw his eyes in her daughter. A Korean mafia boss discovers his hidden child with a black woman. The bathroom window is too small, too high, but it's the only way out. Rain hammers against the glass as Aisha Cole lifts her 5-year-old daughter toward the opening. One hand clamped over Farai's mouth, the other wrapped around her trembling body. The little girl's eyes, wide, amber, impossibly familiar, stare up at her mother with a terror no child should ever know. Those eyes. Every time Aisha looks into them, she sees him. Beyond the locked bathroom door, footsteps echo through her apartment. Heavy boots, multiple sets, with splinters as they tear through her living room. Aisha's phone buzzes against the tile floor. Unknown number. Is your daughter safe? Farai whimpers, and Aisha feels her world fracturing. Another message. Because someone is watching her. The bathroom door handle twists. Hard. Not police. Something worse. She has maybe 60 seconds before they break through. 60 seconds to make a choice she swore she'd never make. Her finger hovers over a contact she hasn't touched in 5 years. No name. Just a Seoul country code. The door frame cracks. She presses call. Across an ocean, in a high-rise penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay's glittering waterfront, the call begins to ring. 3 days earlier, Aisha's apartment smelled like cinnamon tea and safety. Farai colored at the coffee table, her small legs swinging, humming a song from school, the kind of ordinary moment Aisha had fought like hell to build. "Mommy," Farai said suddenly, not looking up from her drawing. "The nice man at the school gate today, he looked like me." Aisha's hand froze mid-stir. "What man?" "The tall one." Farai held up her crayon. "He had eyes like mine. Amber." The wooden spoon clattered against the counter. Farai turned, concerned. "Mommy." How could she explain? How could she tell her daughter that the man she'd loved 5 years ago was brilliant and protective, and also someone who built empires on silence and fear? That she'd run the moment she realized she was pregnant, choosing a beat-up Honda and a cracked bumper sticker over a penthouse prison? Sometimes. Aisha knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words like landmines. Sometimes grown-ups make hard choices to protect the people they love. That night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then it rang. A distorted voice. Aisha Cole, journalist, age 29. Daughter Farai, age 5. Lives at. They knew everything. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, Yuchon Park stood at floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Seattle's lights blur in the rain. At 34, he controlled more of the Pacific Northwest shadow economy than most people could imagine. Beneath his legitimate logistics empire lay a network built on information, leverage, and absolute control. Min Jae, his fixer, entered quietly. "Sir, there's been unusual activity. Your secure line." Multiple attempts from a Seattle area code. Seattle. 5 years ago, he'd met a woman there. A fierce, brilliant journalist named Aisha who'd looked at him like he was a man, not a weapon. Then one night, she'd looked at him with horror, and by morning, she was gone. "Ignore it," he said flatly. His phone rang. Private line. "Seattle." He answered. "Yuchon." Her voice was breathless, terrified. "I know I have no right to call you, but I need." A crash in the background. A child's frightened cry. "Please. She has your eyes, and they're going to kill us both." The line went dead. Yuchon stood frozen. "She has your eyes." A child. His child. Min Jae. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I need a location trace on that call. And get me our people in Seattle. All of them. Now." "Sir. Someone just took my daughter." "Hello, family. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so I can send special appreciation to you. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get intense. Now let's go deep into the story. Yuchon's hands shook as he gripped his phone. In 15 years of building an empire from nothing, his hands had never betrayed him. Not during territory wars in Busan. Not when he'd taken control of the syndicate and buried the men who opposed him. Not even when bullets shattered glass inches from his skull in a Vancouver warehouse. But now they trembled. 5 years of silence ended in 17 seconds. Aisha's voice had come through the line, thin and breathless, wrapped in static and fear. Older, sharper, but unmistakably hers. And then the words that shattered everything he thought he knew. She has your eyes. Location found, sir. Min Jae's fingers moved across his tablet. 2847 Riverside Drive, Apartment 3C, Seattle, Washington. Call lasted 17 seconds before disconnection. Emergency services dispatched to that address 2 minutes ago. Seattle. His jaw tightened. How fast can we get there? Commercial flight, 9 hours. But sir, not commercial. Yuchan was already moving, pulling on his coat. Call our pilot. I want wheels up in 20 minutes. Sir, you need to know. Min Jae hesitated. I ran preliminary checks. The threat isn't external. Yuchan stopped. Explain. The digital fingerprints trace back to our network. Someone inside your organization knows about the child. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Who? I'm still pulling threads, but... Sir, there's chatter about Wusuk running off-books operations. Human trafficking. Leverage schemes. His second-in-command. The man he'd trusted for 8 years. Yuchan's voice went lethal. Find him. And Min Jae. Get me everything on Aisha Cole and her daughter. Everything. 5 years ago, Aisha Cole had walked into his life like a question he wasn't prepared to answer. A journalist investigating corruption who'd somehow seen past his carefully constructed walls. For 6 months, she'd been his weakness, his conscience, his hope. Then she'd uncovered something. A shipping route, a name, a body. And he'd made the choice he always made. Protect the empire. He'd erased the threat, pushed her away, told himself it was mercy. He never imagined she was carrying his child. And now someone in his organization was using that child as a weapon. Yuchan stared at his reflection in the dark glass. A man who'd built everything on control, now utterly powerless. Sir, Min Jae said quietly, the jet is ready. Yuchan turned from the window. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every decision he'd ever made, and every one he was about to unmake. Then let's go get my daughter. The words tasted foreign on Yuchan's tongue. My daughter. 2 words that rewrote his entire existence in the span of a heartbeat. Min Jae was already coordinating logistics, extraction teams, flight paths, surveillance, but Yuchan couldn't hear any of it. His mind had turned into a time machine, dragging him backward through 5 years of carefully constructed silence. 5 years earlier, Seattle. He'd met Aisha Cole in a place he had no business being, a community fundraiser for trafficking survivors. Yuchan had attended under the guise of his legitimate logistics company, playing the role of philanthropic businessman. Clean suit, polite smile, checkbook ready. Then she'd walked up to him with a recorder in one hand and fire in her eyes. Mr. Park, she'd said, not bothering with pleasantries. Your company moves more shipping containers through the port of Seattle than anyone else. I'm writing a piece on labor exploitation. Care to comment? Most people feared him even when they didn't know why. Aisha Cole looked at him like he was a puzzle she intended to solve. I'd be happy to, he'd said, surprising himself. Over dinner? She'd studied him for 3 long seconds. Dinner. Public place. I pay for myself. He'd smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less. That first dinner turned into late-night conversations. Her asking questions he'd never answer honestly. Him drawn to the way she saw the world. Not in power and leverage, but in stories and truth. She made him feel human. For 6 months, he lived a double life. With Aisha, he was Yuchan Park, businessman. Thoughtful. Careful with his words but generous with his time. The man who showed up at her apartment with takeout when she worked late. Who listened to her rant about corruption she couldn't quite prove. Away from her, he was what he'd always been. A man who controlled trafficking routes by owning them entirely, who eliminated threats with surgical precision, who built safety for others on a foundation of calculated violence. He told himself he was protecting her by keeping those worlds separate. He was wrong. The night it fell apart, Aisha had been investigating a series of disappearances, women vanishing from immigrant communities. Her notes covered her apartment walls. Names, dates, shipping schedules. Shipping schedules Yuchan recognized. Not his operations. Woo-suk's. His second-in-command had been running a side network, using Yuchan's infrastructure to move human cargo. Yuchan had discovered it the same week Aisha did, and he'd handled it his way. Quietly, permanently. The women were recovered. The men responsible disappeared. The evidence Aisha had been chasing vanished overnight. She'd looked at him across her kitchen table, her laptop open to files that had been corrupted, sources who'd suddenly stopped talking. "It was you," she'd whispered. Not a question. A wound. "Aisha, don't." Her voice broke. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Those women, I was so close to finding them, and then everything just disappeared. The same week you started asking questions about my investigation." He should have lied. Should have played the concerned boyfriend, the helpful businessman. Instead, he'd met her eyes and said nothing. Silence was its own confession. "Who are you?" she'd asked. "Someone who keeps you safe," he'd answered. "By making evidence disappear? By controlling what I can and can't uncover." Her hands shook. "I thought you were different. I am exactly who I've always been." His voice had gone cold, defensive. "You just chose not to see it." She'd stepped back like he'd struck her. The next morning, she was gone. Apartment cleared out. Phone disconnected. No forwarding address. Yuchan had told himself it was better this way. Safer for her. Cleaner. He'd never let himself wonder why she'd run so completely, so desperately. Now he knew. Present day. "Sir." Min-jae's voice cut through the memory. "We have the location. 2847 Riverside Drive, apartment 3C. But sir, there's a problem." Yuchan's head snapped up. "What problem?" Seattle PD responded to a 911 call from that address 14 minutes ago. Forced entry. Signs of struggle. Nobodies. His blood turned to ice. And Aisha? Gone. Her daughter too. Security footage shows them fleeing through a bathroom window into a black SUV. Unknown plates. Who took them? Min-jae's expression darkened. "I traced the vehicle to a shell company. Same financial fingerprints as Woo-suk's off-books operations." Yuchan's hands curled into fists. For 15 years, he'd built an empire on control. Every move calculated. Every threat neutralized before it became a problem. But this was his daughter, a child whose existence he'd just discovered, in the hands of a man who trafficked in human lives. This was Aisha, who'd run from him once to protect that child, now trapped because of him. A new feeling burned through his chest. Not the cold rage of a crime lord. Something hotter, more primal. Fatherhood. "Min-jae." His voice was deadly calm. "I want Woo-suk's location. I want every person who works for him identified. And I want to know exactly what leverage he thinks my daughter gives him." "Already tracking." Min-jae paused. "Sir, if Woo-suk knows the child is yours, he'll use her to." "I know what he'll do." Yuchan grabbed his coat. "That's why we're going to find them first." "How long until wheels up?" 15 minutes. "Make it 10. As Yuchan headed for the door, he caught his reflection in the dark glass. A man who'd spent 15 years believing power meant control. Now he understood. Real power was a 5-year-old girl with amber eyes he'd never met, and he would burn down everything he'd built to keep her safe. Seattle. 3:42 p.m. Outside Bright Futures After-School Center. Yuchan had tracked hundreds of targets in his life. Enemies. Traitors. Men who needed to disappear. He'd never tracked his own daughter. The black sedan idled across the street, windows tinted dark enough to hide him but clear enough to see everything. Rain glazed the pavement silver. Parents clustered near the entrance, umbrellas blooming like flowers. Then the doors opened, and there she was, small, maybe waist-high to her mother, a pink backpack too big for her shoulders, clutching a teddy bear like it held the secrets of the universe. Even her name felt like something fragile in his mouth. Yuchan's breath caught as Aisha emerged behind her, one hand immediately finding Farai's, pulling her close with the instinctive protectiveness of someone who'd spent 5 years looking over her shoulder. Aisha looked different. Older, yes, but softer somehow. Her locks were tied back in a colorful scarf. No makeup, wearing jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. She'd traded the woman who challenged powerful men for the woman who prioritized school pickups. She'd chosen this. Chosen a beat-up Honda with a cracked bumper sticker. Black girls deserve soft lives. Over the life he could have given her. No, he corrected himself. The life she ran from. But it was Farai who destroyed him. She skipped, toward the car, saying something that made Aisha laugh. The sound carried across the rain-soaked street, and Yuchan felt something crack inside his chest. Then Farai turned, just for a second, looking back at the school, her teddy bear tucked under one arm, and the streetlight caught her face full-on. Amber eyes, wide, curious. His eyes. Yuchan stopped breathing. It wasn't just the color, though that alone was damning. It was the way she looked at the world. That stillness. That analytical gaze that seemed to absorb everything and reveal nothing. He'd spent his life mastering that expression. Seeing it on a 5-year-old's face felt like staring into a mirror that reached across time. Farai tilted her head slightly, studying a bird on a fence post with the same focused intensity Yuchan used to assess threats. She didn't smile, didn't point excitedly like the other children. She just observed. Then she smiled, sudden and bright, and the stillness shattered into pure joy. His daughter. The word wouldn't stop echoing in his mind. Sir. Minjae's voice came through the earpiece, careful, quiet. I have the records. Yuchan couldn't look away from Farai climbing into the Honda's back seat, still clutching her teddy bear. Tell me. Farai Cole. Born October 14th. Seattle General Hospital. 5 years, 3 months old. Mother. Aisha Cole. Father. Minjae paused. Listed as unknown. Unknown. 5 years. Aisha had carried his child, given birth alone, raised her in silence, and he'd never known. Fury burned through him. Not at Aisha, at himself. He'd pushed her away, chosen his empire over her safety, made himself into exactly the kind of man a woman would run from while pregnant. She hadn't kept Farai from him out of spite. She'd kept her from him out of survival. Sir, what are your orders? Yuchan watched the Honda pull away from the curb, brake lights flashing red in the rain. Every instinct screamed at him to approach, to knock on Aisha's door, to meet his daughter, to explain, though what could he possibly say? Hello, I'm your father. I'm also the reason your mother fled Seattle 5 years ago. I traffic in violence and secrets, and my second-in-command is currently hunting you for leverage. No. Approaching them would paint a target on their backs brighter than any surveillance. His presence was the danger. Pull a full protection detail, Yuchan said finally, voice rough. I want eyes on them 24/7. Discreet. They don't see us, they don't sense us. Anyone who gets within 50 feet of that apartment gets flagged. And you, sir? Yuchan closed his eyes. I stay away. The hardest order he'd ever given. Aisha's apartment. 6:17 p.m. Farai hummed at the coffee table, coloring a picture of a princess with amber eyes. Aisha prepped dinner, but her hands moved on autopilot. Something was wrong. That feeling, the one that had kept her alive for 5 years, crawled up her spine like a warning. The feeling of being watched. She checked the windows, locked the door, scanned the street below. Nothing. But the feeling didn't fade. Mommy! Farai looked up. The nice man at the school gate today, he looked like me. The knife slipped from Aisha's fingers and clattered against the counter. What man? The tall one. He had eyes like mine. Aisha's heart stopped. No. No. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Is your daughter safe? The world tilted. She stared at the message, hands shaking, while Farai hummed innocently behind her. 5 years of running. 5 years of hiding. And somehow he'd found them. 9:14 p.m. The knock came calm, professional. The kind of knock that said authority. Aisha didn't move from where she stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at her phone. Unknown. Is your daughter safe? Mommy? Farai's voice was small. The second knock was harder, more insistent. Seattle police. We need to ask you some questions about a disturbance reported at this address. Police don't text warnings before they knock. Aisha's training, years of investigative journalism, of learning to spot lies, kicked in like ice water. She scooped Farai into her arms and ran. Bathroom. Locked. Towels shoved under the door. Mommy, what's happening? Farai's eyes went wide. Teddy bear clutched to her chest. Shoo, baby. We're playing the quiet game, okay? Whoever stays quietest wins. The front door handle twisted. Hard. Not police. Her phone buzzed. Unknown, go out the window. Now. Her fingers shook as she typed back. Aisha. Who is this? 3 dots appeared instantly. Unknown. Someone who knows you're in danger. A crash shattered the living room. With splintering. Boots on hardwood. Ma'am, we know you're here. Come out and no one gets hurt. Lies. All lies. Her phone rang. She answered, voice barely a whisper. How do you know? Aisha. One word. Low. Controlled. Wrapped in an accent that still haunted her dreams. Her breath stopped. You need to trust me. Yuchan. His name tasted like ashes and longing. Silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then, quietly, devastatingly. You shouldn't have kept her from me. Tears burned her eyes. I didn't keep her from you. I kept her safe. From me. From your world. Her voice cracked. You made people disappear, Yuchan. You think I wanted my daughter growing up in that? A thunderous crash, her bedroom door slamming open. Farai whimpered. Yuchan's voice sharpened. All business. They're not here for you. They're here for her. Ice flooded Aisha's veins. Why? Because someone in my organization believes blood is leverage. His tone turned lethal. They know she's mine. How? The word came out broken. I don't know. But Aisha. His voice dropped urgent. They won't stop. You need to move. Now. The bathroom door handle rattled. Window, he commanded. There's an alley behind your building. Black SUV. 30 seconds. You're insane. I can't. You can. And you will. Because if they take her, I will never see my daughter alive again. My daughter. The words detonated something inside her chest. Footsteps pounded toward the bathroom. Aisha shoved the window open with shaking hands. Rain poured in. 3-story drop to a narrow alley below. I see the SUV, she breathed. Then jump. The bathroom door shuddered under a violent kick. Aisha wrapped both arms around Farai. Hold on tight, baby. Don't let go. She climbed onto the toilet, squeezed through the window, and dropped. 3 feet down, a fire escape caught her. She scrambled down, Farai crying against her shoulder, rain soaking them both. Behind them, gunfire. Glass exploded. Bullets punched through the bathroom window, sparking off metal railings. Aisha ran. The SUV's door flew open as she hit the alley pavement. Hands grabbed her. Firm, protective, pulling her and Farai inside. The door slammed. Tires screeched. Farai screamed, a sound that tore through Aisha's soul. It's okay, baby. It's okay. She rocked her daughter, checking for injuries, for blood, finding only rain and terror. We're safe now. We're. A man leaned forward from the front seat and turned. Aisha's world stopped. 5 years vanished in a heartbeat. Yuchan looked older, sharper. His jaw carried new scars she didn't recognize. But his eyes, those amber eyes, were exactly as she remembered. Farai stopped crying. She stared at him with that strange stillness she'd inherited, studying his face with the analytical precision of a child who understood more than she should. Then, in a voice so small it nearly broke him, "You look like me." Yuchan's breath caught audibly. For a man who'd built an empire on control, who'd stared down enemies without flinching, who'd ordered deaths with the same casual precision others ordered coffee, he nearly collapsed. "Yes," he whispered, voice cracking on the single syllable.
Ido.
Farai tilted her head. Are you my daddy? The question landed like a bullet. Aisha closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Yuchan reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering in the space between them, uncertain for perhaps the first time in his life. He swallowed hard. I'd like to be. Farai considered this with the seriousness of someone 3 times her age. Then she held out her teddy bear. Mr. Bear thinks you have kind eyes. Something shattered inside Yuchan's carefully constructed armor. He took the teddy bear with hands that had killed men, held it like something holy, and met his daughter's gaze. Thank you, he managed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing fainter as the SUV merged into traffic and disappeared into Seattle's rain-soaked night. In the back seat, Aisha held her daughter. In the front, Yuchan held a teddy bear. And between them stretched 5 years of silence, lies, and a truth neither of them was ready to face. They were a family now, whether they wanted to be or not. The safe house smelled like concrete and surveillance equipment. Aisha set Farai down in the sterile living room. Bare walls, reinforced windows, cameras in every corner, and turned on Yuchan with 5 years of fury blazing in her eyes. Don't. She held up a hand, voice shaking. Don't you dare act like you're saving us when you're the reason we need saving. Yuchan stood perfectly still, rain dripping from his coat onto the floor. Aisha, you disappeared. The words exploded out of her. You pushed me away, erased everything I was investigating, and when I left, you didn't come after me. Not once. 5 years, Yuchan. 5 years. I thought. You thought what? That I'd just forget you? That I'd move on. Her laugh was bitter, broken. I was pregnant, terrified, alone. And you were here building your empire while I was figuring out how to afford diapers. I didn't know. His voice cut through her rage, quiet but devastated. Aisha, I swear to you, I didn't know about Farai. She stopped, stared at him. You think I would have stayed away if I'd known? He stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw past the control to the raw pain beneath. You think I wouldn't have moved heaven and earth to find you? Then why didn't you look? She whispered. Because I thought leaving you alone was the only way to keep you safe. His jaw tightened. From me. From my world. I was trying to protect you. By abandoning me? By loving you enough to let you go. The words hung between them like something fragile and sharp. Across the room, Farai sat on the edge of a couch, teddy bear in her lap, watching them with those 2 knowing amber eyes. Mommy's sad, she said quietly. Aisha's anger drained away, replaced by exhaustion. She crossed to Farai, pulling her close. I'm okay, baby. Farai looked past her mother to Yuchan. Are you sad too? Yuchan crouched, bringing himself to her eye level. A little. Because you missed me? The question nearly destroyed him. Yes, he managed. Very much. Farai studied his face with that unnerving stillness. Then she scooted closer, patting the couch beside her. You can sit here. Mr. Bear says you look tired. Yuchan glanced at Aisha, who nodded slightly. Permission and warning wrapped into one gesture. He sat. Farai immediately leaned against his side, natural as breathing, like she'd been doing it her whole life. You're warm, she observed. Yuchan's throat closed. He didn't trust himself to speak. Do you know my favorite color? Farai asked.
No.
His voice came out rough. What is it? Purple, like the sky before rain. She tilted her head up at him. What's yours? He'd never thought about it. Colors were irrelevant in his world. Only power and weakness mattered. But looking down at his daughter's expectant face, he said, Amber, like your eyes. She smiled, bright, genuine, devastating. The door opened. Min-jae entered, expression grim. Sir, we need to talk. Yuchan gently extracted himself from Farai. Stay with your mother, sweetheart. He followed Min-jae to the far corner, out of Farai's earshot. Tell me. Min-jae's jaw was tight. I traced the attack. Digital fingerprints, financial records, personnel movements. It wasn't external. Yuchan already knew, had known since the first text arrived. But hearing it confirmed felt like a blade between his ribs. Woo-suk. Yes, sir. He's been running off-books operations for at least 2 years. Human trafficking. Women and children, mostly. Using your shipping routes, your logistics network. Rage burned cold through Yuchan's veins. And Farai? He found out about her 3 days ago. One of his people spotted you surveilling the school. They connected the dots. Min-jae paused. Sir, he's planning to use her as leverage. Force you out and take control of the entire operation. Over my dead body. That's likely his plan B. Yuchan stared through the reinforced window at Seattle's glittering skyline. A city he'd controlled from the shadows for 15 years. His empire. His legacy. All of it built on the same violence that now threatened his daughter. Sir. Min-jae's voice was careful. What are your orders? Before Yuchan could answer, a small hand tugged his sleeve. Farai stood beside him, teddy bear tucked under one arm, looking up with concern that no 5-year-old should carry. Are you mad? She asked quietly. The question hit him like a physical blow. He knelt again, meeting her eyes. No, sweetheart. Mommy says mad people hurt others. His chest constricted. Across the room, Aisha watched them, her expression unreadable. Yuchan cupped Farai's small face gently. Then I won't be mad. She studied him seriously. Promise. Promise. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Unexpected, trusting, completely undeserved, and whispered, Okay, I believe you. Yuchan held his daughter for the first time in her life, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and rain, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd built an empire on fear and control. He'd destroyed enemies without hesitation. He'd believed power was the only currency that mattered. But this small weight in his arms, this unconditional trust from someone who barely knew him, this was the only power that meant anything. When Farai pulled back and returned to her mother, Yuchan stood. His expression was carved from stone, but his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Min-jae, I want files on every operation, every transaction, every person in Woo-suk's network. And I want them prepared for delivery. Min-jae's eyes widened. Sir. Yuchan looked at Farai, safe in her mother's arms, and made a choice he'd never imagined making. My empire dies tonight, he said quietly, because if it doesn't, she won't survive it. Sir, if you dismantle everything, you lose all protection, all leverage. I don't care. Yuchan's voice was final. Find Woo-suk. End this. Whatever it takes.
4:47 a.m.
The first explosion took out the east wall. Yuchan was already moving before the dust settled. Muscle memory and 15 years of survival instinct overriding everything else. Get them out! He roared at Min-jae. Gunfire erupted through the breach. Automatic weapons tearing through drywall, surveillance equipment exploding in showers of sparks. Aisha had Farai in her arms before Yuchan reached them, her journalist instincts sharp enough to know the sound of imminent death. Bathroom. Now. Yuchan grabbed her shoulder, steering them toward the interior hallway. There's a service exit. A bullet punched through the window 6 inches from Farai's head. The little girl screamed. Something primal and violent detonated inside Yuchan's chest. He shoved Aisha and Farai behind him, his body becoming a shield, and returned fire through the shattered window. 3 shots. 2 men dropped. Go, he commanded. Yuchan, go. Aisha ran, Farai sobbing against her shoulder. Min-jae appeared from the stairwell, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Sir, we have at least 15 hostiles. Woo-suk's entire strike team. They knew exactly where we were. How many exits? 3. All compromised. Yuchan's jaw tightened. Then we make a 4th. He moved through the safe house like violence personified. Every corner a kill zone. Every doorway a choke point. This wasn't strategy. This was fatherhood distilled into its most primal form. Protect the child, eliminate the threat. A man rounded the corner. Yuchan put 2 rounds in his chest before he could raise his weapon. Another came through the kitchen. Yuchan broke his arm, took his gun, and ended him with clinical efficiency. Blood soaked his shirt, some his, most not. Stairwells clear. Min-jae called from ahead. I have them. We're moving to the garage. Yuchan provided covering fire, bullets tearing through walls, buying seconds Aisha and Farai desperately needed. A round caught him in the shoulder. He barely felt it. Another grazed his ribs. He kept moving. Behind him, Woo-suk's voice echoed through the smoke-filled hallway. Yuchan, you can't run forever. That child is mine now. My leverage, my insurance. Yuchan stopped, turned. Woo-suk stood in the destroyed living room, flanked by 4 armed men, looking like victory incarnate. You were always sentimental, Woo-suk sneered. I knew one day it would destroy you. You're right. Yuchan lowered his weapon slightly. It did. Then he moved. Years of training, brutality, and survival compressed into 5 seconds of calculated violence. He killed the first guard before Woo-suk could blink. The second died reaching for his radio. The third managed 1 shot wild, missing, before Yuchan's blade found his throat. The fourth ran. Woo-suk drew his pistol. Too slow. Yuchan closed the distance, knocked the weapon away, and drove his knife into Woo-suk's gut with surgical precision. She's not leverage, Yuchan breathed into his former friend's ear. She's my daughter. He twisted the blade. Woo-suk gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. You'll lose everything. Good. Yuchan let him drop. The garage.
5:03 a.m.
Min-jae had Aisha and Farai in an armored vehicle, engine running. Yuchan stumbled in, bloodied and pale. Farai's eyes went wide. You're hurt.
I'm okay, sweetheart.
He wasn't, but he would be. Aisha stared at the blood soaking his clothes, something complicated crossing her face. Horror, gratitude, fear. Min-jae appeared in the driver's seat, laptop open. Sir, we need to move. Now, Woo-suk's people are finished. Yuchan pulled out his phone, fingers moving with purpose despite the tremor in his hands. Min-jae, I'm sending you access codes. Everything. Sir. Financial records, shipping manifests, personnel files, offshore accounts. Every transaction tying my organization to trafficking, corruption, extortion. His voice was steady. Final. Upload it. All of it. Interpol, FBI, Seoul Metropolitan Police. I don't care who gets it first. Min-jae's face went pale. Sir, that's your entire empire. Everything you've built is poisoning my daughter before she's even known me. Silence. Do it, Yuchan ordered. Now. Aisha's breath caught. You're destroying everything. Yes. He met her eyes. I am. Your power, your protection, are worth less than her bedtime stories. Farai, not understanding but sensing the gravity, reached for his hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his bloody ones without hesitation. Daddy. The word was tentative. Testing. Yuchan's throat closed. Yes, baby? Are we safe now? He looked down at his daughter, 5 years old, trusting him completely despite everything, and felt the weight of the choice he'd just made. No empire, no protection,
No leverage.
just a father who'd chosen his child over his kingdom. Yes, he whispered. We're safe. Min-jae's fingers flew across the keyboard. Files uploading. Sir, you understand what this means? Every law enforcement agency in the world will. I know. You'll be arrested. Prosecuted. You're looking at. I know. Yuchan squeezed Farai's hand gently. But she'll be safe. And that's all that matters. The laptop chimed. Upload complete. Around the world, servers began receiving the most comprehensive criminal evidence dump in modern history. Trafficking networks collapsed. Arrest warrants generated automatically. An empire built over 15 years began dismantling itself in real time. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer now, converging. Yuchan looked at Aisha.
I'm sorry.
For everything. For the man I was. For the years you lost. She studied him. This man who just sacrificed his entire world for a daughter he'd known for hours, and something in her expression softened. What happens now? She asked quietly. Yuchan glanced down at Farai, who'd fallen asleep against his side, still clutching his hand. Now, he said, I face what I've done, and I become someone she can be proud of. The sirens grew deafening. Dawn broke over Seattle's skyline, and Yuchan Park, crime lord, killer, father, held his daughter and waited for redemption. 72 hours later, the headlines screamed across every major news outlet. International crime syndicate collapses. Kingpin cooperates with authorities. Trafficking network dismantled after unprecedented data leak. Seoul to Seattle. How one man's confession triggered global arrests. Aisha watched the news from a hotel room paid for by witness protection, Farai asleep beside her, and tried to reconcile the man on screen with the one who'd held their daughter 3 nights ago. Yuchan Park, flanked by federal agents, walking into the Seattle FBI field office. No handcuffs. No resistance. Voluntary surrender. She'd expected war. Expected him to fight, to leverage what remained of his power, to disappear into the shadows he'd spent 15 years building. Instead, he'd walked into the light and offered them everything. Day 4. Federal Detention Center. Daddy's not coming back, is he? Farai asked it while coloring, not looking up, like saying it out loud might make it less terrible. Aisha's heart shattered. Not for a while, baby. Did he do something bad? How do you explain moral complexity to a 5-year-old? That someone can be both villain and hero, destroyer and protector? He made some wrong choices, Aisha said carefully, and now he's trying to make them right. Farai set down her crayon. Can I send him a picture? I don't know if. Please. Those amber eyes, his eyes, looked up at her with hope that felt unbearable. Aisha swallowed hard. I'll ask. Day 7. King County Superior Court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, federal prosecutors, international observers, representatives from a dozen law enforcement agencies whose cases had just been solved by one man's testimony. Yuchan sat at the defendant's table in a standard-issue jumpsuit, looking smaller somehow without the tailored suits and controlled power. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. I built an empire on violence and fear, he said into the microphone. I told myself it was necessary, that controlling illegal operations meant preventing worse outcomes. I was wrong. The prosecutor leaned forward. Mr. Park, you've provided evidence leading to 247 arrests across 6 countries. Why? Yuchan's gaze flickered to the gallery, where Aisha sat with Farai in her lap. Because I have a daughter, he said quietly, and I don't want her growing up thinking power means hurting people. Farai waved. Yuchan's composure cracked for just a second. A smile so gentle it didn't belong on a man confessing to organized crime. Then he turned back to the prosecutor and continued dismantling his own legacy, piece by piece. Day 14. Witness Protection Housing. Min Jae arrived with legal documents and exhaustion written across his face. He's cooperating with everything, he told Aisha, testifying against former associates, providing locations of buried evidence. He's giving them 15 years of operations in exchange for what? Reduced sentencing and immunity for you. Aisha froze. What? There were questions about your knowledge of his activities, your proximity to him 5 years ago. Some prosecutors wanted to investigate. Min Jae's expression was grim. Yuchan made your immunity non-negotiable. It was the only thing he demanded. She sat down hard. He was protecting her. Still, even now. What's he looking at? She whispered. 15 to 20 years. Possibly less with continued cooperation and good behavior. 15 years. Farai would be 20 before he got out. He knew, Aisha said, voice breaking. He knew what he was giving up. Yes. Min Jae hesitated. He asked me to give you this. He held out a sealed envelope. Inside, A single page in Yuchan's precise handwriting. Isha, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, meeting Farai was worth everything. Every year I'll lose. Every piece of my empire that deserved to burn. She's beautiful, strong, kind, everything I'm not. Please tell her I'm not mad. Tell her I'm learning to be someone she can be proud of. And tell her I love her, even if I never get the chance to say it in person. Yuchan. P.S. I kept her drawing. The one Minjae brought me. The princess with amber eyes. I look at it every night and remember what matters. Aisha pressed the letter to her chest and cried. For the man he'd been. For the man he was becoming. For the impossible situation they'd never escape. Day 21. Sentencing. Yuchan Park. You are hereby sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole in 12, based on your cooperation and testimony. The gavel fell. 18 years. Farai squeezed Aisha's hand. When can I see Daddy? Aisha looked at Yuchan being led away in chains. He turned one last time, mouthed something that looked like I'm sorry, and disappeared through the door. Soon, baby, Aisha lied. Soon. But as she watched him vanish, something shifted inside her. Hatred for his past? Yes. Gratitude for his sacrifice? Absolutely. But underneath it all, buried beneath 5 years of running and fear and anger, something that felt dangerously like love. Not for the crime lord, for the father who'd chosen his daughter over everything. And that terrified her more than any empire ever could. 6 months later, Community Center, Oakland. Yuchan Park arrived in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, no tailored suits, no armed escorts, no empire casting shadows at his back. Just a man carrying a children's book under one arm and hope like something fragile in his chest. Farai saw him through the window and ran. Daddy! The word still hit him like a miracle. He caught her as she launched into his arms, her laughter bright and uncomplicated in a way that made everything he'd lost feel insignificant. You came, she squealed. I promised, didn't I? Mommy said promises are important. Your mommy is very wise. Aisha stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Not defensively anymore, just cautiously watchful. A social worker stood beside her, clipboard in hand, there to supervise the visit as court ordered. Yuchan set Farai down and met Aisha's eyes. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me see her. I didn't do it for you. But her tone lacked the sharp edge it once carried. I know. 2 hours later, the park. Supervised visitation meant public spaces, playgrounds, community centers, places with witnesses and safety. Yuchan didn't mind. He sat on a park bench watching Farai chase pigeons, the autumn sun warm on his face, and tried to remember the last time he'd sat somewhere without calculating exit routes or assessing threats. Peace felt unfamiliar, disorienting, real. Her hair's a mess, Aisha said, sitting beside him. I tried to braid it this morning and gave up. Yuchan glanced at Farai's lopsided pigtails. I could try. Aisha raised an eyebrow. You know how to braid hair?
No.
He paused. But I'd like to learn. Something softened in her expression. When Farai ran back, breathless and happy, Aisha gestured to Yuchan. Your dad wants to fix your hair. Farai plopped down between his knees without hesitation, handing him her hair ties. Yuchan stared at them like they were encrypted files he needed to decode. You take 3 pieces, Farai instructed patiently, and you go over, under. His hands that had held weapons, signed death warrants, built empires, fumbled with a 6-year-old's hair. That's backwards, Farai giggled.
Sorry.
It's okay. You're learning. Aisha watched them, something complicated and warm blooming in her chest. 20 minutes later, Farai's braids looked questionable, uneven, slightly crooked. Perfect, Farai declared, running to show the social worker. Yuchan looked at his hands, still trembling slightly. I'm terrible at this. You'll get better, Aisha said. She doesn't care if it's perfect. She cares that you tried. Their eyes met. Aisha, I don't. She held up a hand. Not yet. I'm still processing. I understand. Do you? Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. Because I spent 5 years running from you. And now I'm watching you braid our daughter's hair and I don't know what to feel. Yuchan nodded slowly. I spent 15 years building an empire because I thought power meant safety. And now I have nothing. No money, no guards, no control, and I've never felt safer. Why? Because she's safe. And that's all that matters. Farai ran back, holding a dandelion. Make a wish, Daddy. He took the flower, closed his eyes, and blew. Seeds scattered on the wind. What did you wish for? Farai asked. More days like this. 3 months later. Aisha's apartment. Court-approved home visits now. Still supervised, but less formal. Yuchan sat on Aisha's worn couch. Farai curled against his side, reading Where the Wild Things Are in halting English. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made Ms. Mischief. Mischief, Farai corrected. Mischief, he repeated carefully. Your accent's funny. I know. I like it. His throat tightened. They read until Farai fell asleep, her small hand still clutching his shirt. Aisha emerged from the kitchen with tea, sitting in the chair across from them. She asks about you every day, she said quietly. When you're coming, what you're doing, if you're eating enough. And you? Me what? Do you ask about me? Aisha studied him. This man who destroyed his own empire, who fumbled with hair ties and children's books, who looked at their daughter like she hung the moon. Sometimes, she admitted. What do you want to know? Why you really stayed away? 5 years ago. Yuchan's jaw tightened. I told you. Protection. From what? Be specific. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, from me. From the man I was. You looked at me that night and saw a monster. And you were right. I saw someone who made people disappear. I did. I made problems vanish. Threats. Witnesses. He swallowed. I told myself it was necessary, that controlling the darkness meant preventing worse evil. But the truth? I was afraid. Of what? That if you knew who I really was, you'd leave. So I pushed you away first. His voice cracked. And I lost you anyway. You lost 5 years with your daughter. I know. He looked down at Farai, sleeping peacefully. I'll regret that until the day I die. Silence stretched between them. Then Aisha said, quietly, she told me something yesterday. What? That you're nicer when you don't look scary. Yuchan's breath caught. She's right. Aisha continued. You're different. Without the power. Without the empire. I'm just a man. Maybe that's enough. Their eyes met across the dimly lit room, and for the first time in 6 years, something like possibility flickered between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, eventually, healing. 2 weeks later. Federal courthouse. Based on Mr. Park's unprecedented cooperation, testimony leading to 312 convictions, and exemplary behavior, this court grants early release under strict probation conditions. The gavel fell. Yuchan walked out of the courthouse into autumn sunlight. No empire. No shadows. Nothing but supervised probation and a chance. Farai was waiting. She ran to him and he scooped her up, and for the first time in his life, Yuchan Park understood. Real power wasn't built in empires. It was built in braids, bedtime stories, and the courage to become someone your child could love without fear. 3 months later. Oakland Community Center. Yuchan stood outside in the California sunlight, wearing jeans and a faded blue Henley, holding a lunch he'd made himself. Peanut butter and jelly with the crusts cut off, because Farai had mentioned once that crusts were too crunchy. No empire. No guards. No tailored suits or encrypted phones. Just a man waiting to see his daughter. The doors burst open. Daddy! Farai exploded down the steps, backpack bouncing, braids flying. Better braids now, because he'd practiced, and launched herself into his arms with the absolute faith that he'd catch her. He did. Always would. You came, she said, like she hadn't seen him just 3 days ago. I promised, didn't I? She pulled back, hands on his cheeks. studying his face with that serious expression she got when something mattered. You look happy. I am. Good. Mommy says happy is important. Aisha appeared in the doorway, watching them with an expression that had evolved from wary to cautiously warm over the past months. She walked over, and for the first time it didn't feel like a confrontation. Felt like family. Later, Aisha's apartment. Dinner was simple. Spaghetti and salad, nothing fancy. But Farai insisted Yuchan sit between her and Aisha, so we're all together. They ate while Farai narrated her day with the boundless energy of a 6-year-old who decided her father needed to know everything about show and tell, recess politics, and why her friend Marcus thought dinosaurs could fly. Could they? She asked Yuchan seriously. Some of them. Pterosaurs. Technically. See. Farai turned to Aisha triumphantly. Daddy knows. Daddy knows. The casual certainty in her voice still undid him. After dinner, Farai colored at the coffee table while Aisha and Yuchan cleaned up, a domestic rhythm they'd fallen into without planning. She asked me something yesterday, Aisha said quietly, rinsing plates. What? If you were going to live with us? Yuchan's hands stilled. What did you say? That it's complicated. Aisha dried a dish carefully. But she said, Mommy, complicated just means grown-ups are scared. He huffed a quiet laugh. She's not wrong.
No.
Aisha turned to face him. She's not. They stood in the small kitchen, the weight of 5 years and 18 months and everything between pressing against the silence. Yuchan, why did you really destroy everything? He'd answered this before, in court, in statements, in carefully worded testimony. But this was different. This was Aisha asking. Because I didn't want her growing up thinking love meant fear, he said simply. I didn't want her looking at power the way I did, as something worth more than people. I wanted, he swallowed. I wanted to be someone she could be proud of, even if it meant losing everything else. Aisha's eyes glistened. She already is proud of you. I know. I don't understand why, but because she doesn't care about who you were. Aisha stepped closer. She cares about who you're becoming. And Yuchan. So do I. His breath caught. I'm not saying I've forgiven everything, she continued, or that this is easy, but you showed up. Every visit, every supervised hour, every stumbling attempt to braid hair or read bedtime stories. You showed up. It's the only thing I know how to do anymore. It's everything. Her voice cracked. She doesn't need an empire. She needs a father. And you're learning to be one. I'm terrible at it. You're trying. That's what matters. Farai's voice interrupted them. Mommy? Daddy? Can we watch a movie? They turned to find her already arranging pillows on the couch, creating a nest between two carefully positioned spots. One for you, one for Mommy, she explained to Yuchan. And me in the middle, like a sandwich. Yuchan looked at Aisha. Is that okay? She nodded. Yeah, it's okay. 2 hours later, the movie, something animated about talking animals, played on the TV, but Yuchan wasn't watching. Farai had fallen asleep an hour ago, her head on his lap, one small hand curled around Aisha's fingers. They'd stayed like this, frozen in this moment, neither wanting to disturb it. I used to dream about this, Yuchan whispered. About what? Normal. Family dinners and movies and... He gestured helplessly at Farai. This. You had an empire. I had nothing. He looked at Aisha. I had power and money and control. But I didn't have this. Aisha studied him in the flickering TV light, this man who'd dismantled his own kingdom for a chance at redemption. What do you want now? She asked quietly. Yuchan looked down at his daughter, sleeping peacefully, trusting him completely despite everything. This, he said, just this. Every day for the rest of my life. No more empires?
No.
He met Aisha's eyes. I don't want to rule cities. I want to make school lunches. I want to learn how to braid hair properly. I want to show up at parent-teacher conferences and help with homework and be there when she needs me. That's what being a father is. I know. His voice roughened. And it's the only power I've ever wanted. Aisha's hand moved, slowly, carefully, and covered his. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acceptance. Maybe even the beginning of something more. We'll figure it out, she said softly. One day at a time. Together. She looked at their daughter. Safe, loved, sleeping between them, and felt something shift in her chest. Together, she agreed. Later that night, Yuchan stood on Aisha's small balcony, watching Oakland's lights blur through the evening fog. 15 years ago, he'd stood in a penthouse overlooking Seoul, commanding an empire built on shadows. Now he stood in a 2-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and children's drawings on the fridge. No power. No guards. No control. Just peace. Real, terrifying, beautiful peace. Behind him, Aisha appeared with tea. She wants you to tuck her in. His heart cracked open. Really? She asked specifically for you. Said you do the voices better. Yuchan followed her inside, where Farai waited in bed, teddy bear clutched tight. Daddy, will you tell me a story? He sat on the edge of her bed. What kind of story? One where the scary man becomes good. His throat closed. I think I know that one. He began to speak, and Farai listened with those amber eyes. His eyes, already drifting, closed. When she was asleep, Yuchan pressed a kiss to her forehead and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Then he stood in the doorway beside Aisha, watching their daughter breathe peacefully, and understood. Real power wasn't built in empires or shadows or blood. It was built in bedtime stories, scraped knees, honest apologies, and the courage to choose light over darkness, to choose love over legacy, a child over an empire. And for the first time in his life, Yuchan Park, former crime lord, convicted felon, redeemed father, felt like he'd finally won something worth keeping. He'd ruled cities, controlled men, destroyed enemies, but nothing had ever undone him the way a 6-year-old girl with his eyes and her mother's courage had. And that was exactly how it should be.